Good afternoon, guys. Welcome back to my channel, and finally welcome back to a new video. I hope that you all feel good, and for those who doesn't know me,
Angelica Larsson's life looks effortless online. Smiling behind the wheel of massive trucks, handling loads most people wouldn't dare touch, and gaining millions of fans along the way. But behind the cameras, the reality is far more precarious. At one terminal in Sweden, a routine shift almost became a disaster when her wagon started rolling on its own, brakes failing, and trucks in the path. Angelica's quick thinking stopped it, but the fear lingered for days. That incident is only one chapter of a life filled with tight calls, relentless pressure, and sacrifices few notice. What drives someone to keep returning to a job that can hurt, or even end you? Angelica's story is where passion, danger, and fame collide. The wagon horror, a brush with catastrophe on the job. It started out like any other shift for Angelica Larsson. The kind of day where everything blends into routine. You pull into the terminal, check the cargo, follow the same steps you've done 1,000 times. For Angelica, that routine meant carefully backing her Scania truck and wagon into place for unloading. It wasn't glamorous, but it was her rhythm. She disconnected the pneumatic air line for the brakes, unplugged the electrical cables for the lights, and detached the ABS system. Nothing unusual there. The safety system should have kicked in immediately, automatically locking the wagon's brakes once the connections were off. That's what was supposed to happen. Except this time, it didn't. She was already pulling her truck forward to park somewhere else when she caught something in her side mirror. For a second, she couldn't even process what she was seeing. It was her wagon, slowly rolling away on its own. At first, she thought she must be mistaken. There were several identical trailers at the terminal, after all. But then her stomach dropped. It really was hers. There's a specific kind of panic that comes with realizing something big and heavy and completely out of your control is moving. Her heart just stopped for a beat, then started racing as if trying to make up for lost time. Before she could think, she slammed the truck into gear and shot forward, trying to cut off the runaway wagon. Then she jumped out, literally sprinting towards several tons of metal rolling downhill. Somehow, she managed to reach the handbrake and yank it with all her strength just in time. The wagon stopped about a meter away from slamming into another truck. When she later talked about it on her channel, you could still hear the tremor in her voice. It was so close to making an accident, she said, half laughing, half still reliving the fear. No one got hurt. No vehicles were damaged, but she couldn't shake the thought of what could have happened. A fully loaded wagon isn't just a piece of machinery. It's a potential disaster waiting to happen if things go wrong. It could have easily crushed another truck, caused a pileup, or rolled straight into a busy lane. That almost moment stayed with her. She said afterward that her hands were shaking for hours, her body still in fight-or-flight mode long after the danger was over. The tremors didn't stop for 2 whole days. It's strange how quickly normal turns into nightmare, how a split second decides whether a story ends with relief or regret. When they figured out what happened, it turned out there was a glitch in the air pressure system, the very mechanism meant to trigger the automatic brakes. It simply failed. Angelica could have blamed the system or the manufacturer, but she didn't. Instead, she made it a learning point. She told her viewers, always use a strap or a wheel chock. Something extra. Don't just trust the brakes. It wasn't a lecture. It was the kind of advice that comes from surviving something that could have gone horribly wrong. She even asked her audience if they'd ever had similar scares. Do you guys have any stories about the air or brakes? She said, opening up a conversation that many truckers rarely have publicly. Behind the adrenaline and the professionalism was something vulnerable, an admission that even experience and precision can't protect you from everything. The thing is, trucking in Sweden isn't a gentle job. Drivers like Angelica navigate icy roads, unpredictable weather, and wildlife that can dart into the path of a 40-ton vehicle. She drives through regions where winter feels endless, where black ice is a daily gamble, and where you can go hours without seeing another soul. The silence can be both peaceful and unnerving. Maybe that's why the incident shook her so deeply. It reminded her how thin the line really is between control and chaos. And it wasn't her first brush with danger either. Back in 2018, she mentioned what she called an awkward accident, a small loading mishap that left her arm bruised but intact. She laughed it off on Facebook at the time, calling it a funny story. But when you look at it in hindsight, it feels more like one of many reminders that her job, while fulfilling, constantly tests the limits of her safety and endurance. Day after day, she works in minus 30 degrees, hauling cargo that could crush a car if anything goes wrong. She checks the tires in sleet, secures chains in snowstorms, and pushes through exhaustion just to keep the deliveries on schedule. People often see her as fearless, a 5-foot-tall woman commanding massive machinery through frozen roads. But fearlessness isn't really the right word. It's more like persistence. You don't stop being afraid. You just learn to keep moving anyway. When she talks about the experience now, her voice has that steady calm that comes from living through something that could have gone very wrong. She says she's more cautious these days, double-checks her brakes, blocks her wheels, doesn't rush through procedures, no matter how routine they seem. But there's still that moment, tucked somewhere in the back of her mind, the sight of her wagon rolling off like it had a will of its own. You can't unsee that. And maybe that was the start of something shifting for her, because once the fear faded, the attention came. Clips from her video started making rounds online. People fascinated by the blonde Swedish driver who handled near disaster like a pro. It wasn't just truckers watching anymore. Suddenly, her life on the road, her discipline, even her near misses, were pulling in an audience far beyond her circle. That it's strange how the same thing that nearly breaks you can become the reason people start noticing you. One day, she was just sharing a scare. The next, she was trending, getting called things she never asked for, like the world's most beautiful trucker. But that kind of spotlight doesn't come without its own weight. Rise of the world's most beautiful trucker, fame's double-edged sword. Angelica Larsson's rise didn't start with a big announcement or a career-changing deal. It began in 2012 with a few photos she posted on Instagram. Nothing fancy, just snapshots of her life on the road. She was 22, hauling heavy loads through Sweden and sharing bits of it online, not really thinking much of it. But people noticed. Maybe it was the mix of grit and grace. This young woman with flawless skin, strong arms, and a kind of calm confidence, driving machines that weighed more than 60 tons. Within months, her follower count shot up, and suddenly, she wasn't just Angelica from Östersund anymore. Media outlets started calling her the world's most beautiful truck driver. It sounded flattering at first, but it never sat right with her. She kept saying in interviews, "It doesn't matter what you look like. What matters is what you can do and how well you do it." Still, the title stuck. And while she didn't chase fame, it found her, bringing millions of views, messages from fans around the world, and a strange mix of admiration and misunderstanding. Her YouTube channel, which she started around that same time, was her way of showing what the job actually looked like. It wasn't about glamour. It was the dirt under your nails kind of work. Unhooking trailers, loading excavators, tightening straps, and checking brakes in the cold. In one of her early videos, Load a Greater Part 1, she laughs while explaining how to line up the trailer correctly, and in another called 220 Hours to Finland, she documents a long delivery run, showing how precise and focused the job demands you to be. "I love my job," she said in one clip, her face lit up under the soft northern light. "I love the trucks, the forklift, the wheel loader. That's my passion." She wasn't exaggerating. She had earned her licenses at 19 after training intensely back in 2009. By her early 20s, she could handle almost any machine: semi-trucks, dumpers, plows, and special transport vehicles. Her main work was hauling oversized mining equipment through Sweden's Arctic regions, where the roads are narrow and the weather changes faster than you can blink. It's not a job for the easily discouraged. As her online presence grew, so did the opportunities. She got invited to events, appeared in the DSI calendar in 2017, and even flew to the United States to test drive the big names: Kenworths, Peterbilts, Volvos. She once shared a clip of herself driving through Dallas traffic in a Volvo 680, laughing about how American highways let her go 80 miles per hour while Sweden capped at 55. "Kenworths are so badass," she said with that familiar excitement that makes her videos feel more like friendly chats than content. But fame is tricky. It doesn't always show up empty-handed. Alongside the admiration came doubt. Some people began accusing her of faking her skills, calling her a model pretending to be a trucker for attention. It was a strange accusation, especially since her videos literally showed her chaining loads and maneuvering 40-foot trailers on icy mountain roads. Still, the comments kept coming. "I got more attention with pictures of the truck," she once said, explaining how she began focusing her posts more on the technical side just to prove she knew her craft. The criticism stung. It wasn't just about pride. It was about the frustration of having years of effort reduced to a label. To many, she was just the pretty trucker, not the woman who had spent freezing mornings under a trailer adjusting couplings or who drove through storms with visibility so bad she could barely see the road markings. People loved the image of her behind the wheel, but few understood the weight of the job or the toll it takes on your body and mind. And that's what made her story more complicated. Because while the fame opened doors, brand partnerships, global recognition, it also magnified her isolation. Long-haul trucking means days, sometimes weeks, of being alone. The cab becomes your world, and the world outside keeps moving without you. She talked once about how quiet the nights could get, the kind of quiet where even the radio static starts to sound like company. Among her peers in Sweden, though, she earned respect. Not through words, but through how she handled herself. Steady, unbothered, efficient. Her male colleagues saw her lift, drive, and load just like anyone else, maybe even better. There wasn't much room for anyone to doubt her once they worked alongside her. But that constant need to prove herself, to be more competent, more careful, more perfect, was exhausting in its own way. Every time she posted, she carried the invisible weight of being both admired and underestimated. And maybe that tension, the need to keep showing up despite it all, was what slowly shaped her into someone people couldn't stop watching. But before all of that, the cameras, the critics, the calendars, there was a little girl who couldn't stop looking at trucks rumbling down the road. And that's where her story really begins. Childhood dreams and unyielding passion, the road that called her. Back in the 90s, long before Instagram or YouTube, Angelica Larsson was already hooked on trucks. She was born June 9, 1990, in Gällivare, a small town in northern Sweden, and by the age of 4, she was climbing into the cab of a semi-truck, fascinated by the view up there and the little dials and gauges that somehow felt like magic. She later said it wasn't just a loud machine. It felt like freedom, a way to see the world from a higher perspective. While other kids spent hours with dolls or bikes, she spent them staring at wheels and imagining where they could take her. Her father played a big role in encouraging her curiosity. He let her drive his wheel loader and shovel snow around the yard, handing her responsibility and trust early on. It wasn't long before she realized that the thrill she felt in a cab or behind a machine wasn't a hobby. It was a calling. By the time she could get her truck license, she jumped in without hesitation, ready to enter a world dominated almost entirely by men. By 19, trucking wasn't just something she did. It defined her days. Early jobs often meant hauling through Arctic winters, where every task could feel like a survival test. Wildlife could wander onto icy roads at any moment. Black ice could appear without warning, and some of the cargo she hauled was wider than the lanes she drove on. Videos she later posted show her thrill for the work, whether she's maneuvering a wheeled excavator, which she calls interesting compared to the tracked ones, or plowing yards for fun with her own wheel loader in a clip called Plowing the Yard. And trucking wasn't her only adrenaline fix. She's tried skydiving, scuba diving, and motorcycles, showing a side of her that always seeks the next rush. But all that passion came with costs. Long hours and constant travel made it hard to maintain normal relationships, and friends or family sometimes question her choices. Why chase isolation and unpredictability over stability? Even at mining sites where the teams are roughly 50-50 men and women, skepticism followed her from the outside in. Her answer was simple and consistent. I love to load the trucks. That is my passion. That love for the work, sparked in childhood, carried her forward but also brought loneliness and sacrifice. The road gave her freedom and excitement, yet it demanded time, attention, and connection she could never fully have. Meanwhile, Angelica didn't just drive trucks. She pushed through walls most people didn't even see. Breaking barriers and facing backlash, gender, grit, and online wars. In Sweden's trucking world, she became a quiet champion for women, showing that skill really does matter more than stereotypes. She often points out that the mining sites she works at are about 50-50 men and women, which feels like progress, but she's also quick to show the careful work behind it all, like unhooking trailers safely with steel wires for the ABS or taking extra care on a first drive. I'm always very careful when I drive something for the first time. The physical side of trucking can be brutal, especially for someone 5 feet tall, with hours spent strapping loads, securing tarps, and unloading massive machinery. Yet she handles it with what fans describe as style and grace. Traveling to the U.S. gave her even more perspective. Euro trucks and tight docks versus wide American highways, and logging systems that track years of data. Fame, though, brought a harder lesson. By the early 2020s, a wave of online criticism accused her of faking her skills. People loved watching her trucks, but some insisted her fame was just her looks. That kind of attention took a toll. Joy and empowerment often came with a flip side: isolation, scrutiny, and trolls who didn't see the work behind the camera. Still, she pushed back with honesty and transparency, earning respect from peers who had witnessed her dedication firsthand. Every viral post carried both admiration and unspoken struggle, hinting at the pressures behind the seemingly perfect life she portrayed online. The memoir's revelations, hidden turmoil, and difficult choices. In 2022, Angelica Larsson took the step many of her fans didn't see coming and released Vägval, Choices, a memoir that pulled back the curtain on the life behind the trucks. The book doesn't just retell her viral videos or stunts on icy roads. It digs into the quieter, harder moments that shaped her, the kind you rarely notice in short clips. Long hauls, missed nights with friends or partners, and the weight of constant scrutiny had left marks that fame couldn't hide. She describes it as a hidden life of difficult choices, where independence often came at the expense of relationships, and where loneliness settled in during endless drives through northern Sweden or on remote mining sites. Fans might have seen a confident, capable driver in videos and photos, but the memoir shows a woman juggling emotional turmoil while keeping the cabs running and the cargo secure. She writes about escaping unhappiness by throwing herself into work, yet the personal costs were real. Partners left behind, skepticism from colleagues and family, and online criticism that sometimes cut deeper than icy roads ever could. Her journey wasn't just about driving trucks. It was about driving herself toward a life of her own, no matter how difficult. One passage notes, capturing the tension between passion and sacrifice that defined her early adulthood. Since the memoir, Angelica's presence hasn't waned. Videos in 2025, like Unique Truck-Trailer Combination with tens of thousands of views, show her still tackling complex hauls, sharing expertise, and finding joy in the work she loves. But Vägval also humanizes her in a way short clips never could. It's clear that every achievement carried a cost, a quiet isolation that accompanied freedom and skill. Through accidents, backlash, and personal struggles, she's become a figure who inspires women to push boundaries and embrace challenges, showing that resilience often comes from navigating the hardest paths. And even as harsh weather, long drives, and solitary nights continue, Angelica keeps moving forward, proving that strength isn't just about handling a truck. It's about carrying yourself through everything life throws in the lane ahead. What would you do if you were behind the wheel in Angelica's shoes? Share with us in the comments. If her journey made you pause, reflect, or even rethink what passion really means, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe for more stories. You should check